Hi, I'm Dr. Mary Campbell, and I'm an associate professor over in the School of Art. I take students to Paris to study art history every July. Or, every July we don't have a global pandemic. Here I am with students in the Louvre. I'm the one with the jazz hands. I do that a lot when I talk about art, especially when I'm sitting in front of paintings like these. The thing with this class is that we don't spend our time in a classroom, at least not a traditional one. Instead, we use Paris's museums as our classroom. If you take this course, you'll get an introduction to 7 centuries of Western art in front of the art itself. I should mention that most of my students aren't art history majors, or even minors. Most of them haven't studied art history at all before they show up in Paris. This student, Chris, was a business major. Courtney was an economics major, and now she's in law school. She absolutely demolished the LSAT. Jay here, he majored in chemical engineering, but here he is doing a fantastic job explaining a work by the French Romantic painter Géricault. The point is that getting you up to speed art historically, that's my job. All you need is curiosity and a sense of adventure, maybe a willingness to saddle up on some old school carousel horses when I take you to the Musée des Arts Forains. It's amazing. Woody Allen shot a scene for Midnight in Paris here.
You're fine.
Another thing you don't need? French. If you do speak French, or you're learning it, that's great. You can revel in 3 weeks of going full francophone. If you don't, though, it's no problem. I do. I spent a year living in Paris when I was in college, which is pretty much why I do this, and the class itself is entirely in English. That said, no one wants to be the American who barges into some bakery or cafe and starts demanding that everyone speak English. So I'll teach you some French phrases to help you get around. Last year, the School of Art's Print Club even helped me make these tote bags for my students. SOS Français. How to say the basics. Please, thank you, where's the subway? That sort of thing. Not that the bags ever actually made it out of Knoxville. Check this out. I thought this was so clever. The words in the figure's crown. This is the phrase the Marquis de Lafayette added to his family crest right before he sailed from France to South Carolina to help George Washington win the American Revolution. Colonel. Why not? Why not set sail in pursuit of transatlantic adventure and Franco-American friendship? Obviously, I added this before I realized that why not is not a question you ask the year 2020. Not unless you want a totally rafted the Medusa-style answer. I promise you'll get that joke if you take the class. So maybe you're getting a sense of the class now. We move from museum to museum, studying the great masterworks of Western art history, as well as some of the maverick she's and only now beginning to be appreciated artists. I mean, really, how much Mona Lisa can any one person take? We start out at the Louvre and spend more than a week there, taking a seat on the ground and discussing individual works as seas of disoriented tourists go by. Luckily, we have these amazing passes that let us go in and out of the museum as much as we want, cutting the line every time. After the Louvre, we move on to a bunch of other museums and exhibitions. Here are 2 of my students at the Musée d'Orsay, looking at Edgar Degas' sculpture, Little Dancer. Here we are at the Pompidou Center. This student is leading us through the work of the abstract expressionist painter Jackson Pollock. A few years ago, we went to the Rodin retrospective at the Grand Palais. Here's my student Marge sketching in front of one of Rodin's sculptures. Before I got a PhD in art history, I was a lawyer. I graduated from Yale Law, clerked in DC. I'm still a member of the New York Bar. I actually teach an art law class at UT. You should take it. I have to say though, nothing in the legal world gives me the sort of pleasure that moments like watching Marge draw in Paris do. Speaking of pleasure, we also always go to the French Impressionist painter Claude Monet's gardens in Giverny. It's about an hour outside of Paris. We take the train and stroll around the grounds, admiring Monet's flowers and his pond and the water lilies that inspired his late paintings. If you come, you can also see the place where a young woman came up to one of my students and gave him this drawing. He'd been sitting on a bench in the gardens, listening to music and writing, and he hadn't noticed that she'd been drawing him. At least not until she came up to him to give him the picture. He was too shy to get her name. He just let her go. We spent the train ride home looking at the picture, hoping she'd written her name on it somewhere, maybe even given him her phone number. We do other cool things too. Last year we went to a performance at the Opéra Garnier. Check out this ceiling by Chagall. The theater also has this incredible ability to make you look super glamorous if you pose in front of it. These are my students. The tall one in the middle, that's Alyssa. We sat together during the performance, in our own box. We both cried. We've also taken a baking class from this French pastry chef, Freddy. That guy was strict. You did not take your eyes off the meringue. Not unless you wanted to get accused of faire bêtises and doing n'importe quoi. We have a few group meals, a little pre-fee in front of the Pompidou Center on the last night of class, a long lunch in this old-school restaurant called Bouillon Julien. I read about it in the New York Times a few years ago and knew we had to check it out. And then there's this, one of my favorite places, the Atelier de Lumière. It's an old iron foundry where you walk through projections and animations of works by artists like Gustav Klimt and Van Gogh. The paintings come to life and surround you, swallow you. They become your world. And really, that world is what this class is ultimately about. The art history and the credits and the knowledge, that's a big part of it. But it's really about living in Paris, in that world. It's about learning what it feels like to walk across the Seine early in the afternoon or late at night. It's about coming across a building that has butterflies all up the side, going to the top of the Eiffel Tower even though you're really scared of heights. It's about finding the place in the Jardin de Luxembourg where the little kids sail rented boats in the fountain, and the old men sit in the ferme chairs and smoke cigars and watch. It's about discovering a merry-go-round in the Jardin des Plantes where you can ride extinct animals, a dodo bird, or a thylacine, or a giant horned turtle. It's about making your way to a cathedral so beautiful you can't believe it's an ordinary part of ordinary people's lives. It's about taking what the Knoxville-born painter Buford Delaney called the unusual door, passing through to experiences and sensations and opportunities and finally memories that you never could have imagined. Delaney eventually took that door to Paris. I hope you do too. In 1964, Ernest Hemingway wrote, "If you were lucky enough to have lived in Paris as a young man, then wherever you go for the rest of your life, it stays with you, for Paris is a movable feast." He was right. What he didn't mention is that if you're lucky enough to live in Paris at your age, you'll probably spend the rest of your life trying to find a way back to the city. But that's okay. You've got all the time in the world to figure out that part. Right now, just come through the door with me. Let's go have an adventure.